have notes. Well, first off, thank you very much. I just feel so honored that you welcomed me into your church. I think this is great. Thank you, Ron. Ron's been working with me. We've known each other a few years now, I think. And it's nice to see Heidi Tice and Rick Tice here, Township Supervisor. I've worked with them over a few years. I used to hang around with a guy named Rick Tice, and I think they're related. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate being here today and speaking. I am Larry Romanelli, Indian Chief. Now, try and figure that out. I don't know how that comes to be, but that's who I am. My Indian name is actually Nimkins, which means Little Thunder. So, in reality, I'm Chief Little Thunder. I'm in my third term now, just finishing up 3 terms, and the longest serving chief in this tribe. Actually, not had a chief serve a full term. So being in my 3rd term, it's like there's something wrong here. And it gets worse than that, but I grew up in Muskegon, went to Muskegon High School. Again, I'm of Italian descent and Native American descent, and there's probably a little bit more in there because you have the now DNA testing, which shows that we're not exactly what we thought we were, and so I'm a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, a little bit of everything. But I grew up in both backgrounds, I guess, and actually I had my stepdad, who I grew up with, was Dutch. He came from the Postuma family, so it gets crazier than that. And I grew up in a neighborhood which was called Jackson Hill, which was a mix of Irish, Hispanic, Italian, Black, and so I have a well-rounded background. And so that's what I come here with. So roses are red, violets are blue. I'm a little mixed up, and so am I. I don't know. There are about, my tribe has 4,200 members, and we're stretched out across the whole 50 states, and then abroad we have some people that are in service. So we have about 4,200 members in our tribe. Our seat of government is up in Manistee, Michigan, and we do a pretty good job, I think, in the community. I didn't aspire to be an Indian chief. I was lousy at history in school. I was busy looking out the window. I like geography better than history. But now that I'm a chief, I'm right in the middle of governments. And it's kind of a scary situation. I've had the honor, as was reported, I worked with 3 governors, and very closely. The newest governor, Governor Whitmer, I've met with about 5 times already. I think we're having a very good relationship. We've had some time to talk about the things that are of interest to me and of interest to her. Before that, I met with and had, I think, a very good relationship with Governor Snyder. And before that was Governor Granholm. So it's been interesting. I think they've been very polite, very pleasant to me. As a chief, Indian chief, I tend to walk right down the center. I call myself a Republican or a Democrat or whatever you want to call it. I have to work with all, and I think that's good. I think I'm standing on something here. There we go. So I've had that opportunity. I also had the opportunity to meet with President Obama. We spent, it wasn't only me, there was about 12 people in the room, but I was seated right next to him. I don't know how the pick of the draw went, but I was sitting next to him, and we met for, it was supposed to be 20 minutes, and we spoke for about an hour and a half. So he was gracious enough to give us the extra time, and somehow, when they said, who's leading the meeting, all eyes turned to me, so I ended up leading the meeting, and we were talking, and he was to my right, and he's a lefty, and I'm a righty, and we kept bumping each other. And my first reaction is, what are we doing here? And then I realized, oops, I'm next to the President of the United States. I need to slide my chair over. President Trump, I've also had the opportunity, not to meet with him yet, I guess that's coming up, but I had the opportunity to be at one of his first meetings, and I was actually at, there was like, I'm guessing 150 tables filled with people, and I was actually at basically table number 1. So I was from here, less than the back of the room, from him speaking. So I think I have a wide variety of the political backgrounds. Just a few more facts about the tribes, and then I'll go on to a different area. But for example, there are 567 registered federally recognized tribes in the United States, 567. There are 12 of them in the state of Michigan. If you could just flip through a couple of those, I'm sorry. The picture on the left is 9 Ogema, they call multiple Ogemas Ogema, are from Michigan, and they're from the west, primarily the West Michigan Ottawa Indians, and that's what my tribe is, Ottawa Indians. And that's when they met early, right around 1900, so gives you a little, that's kind of an interesting picture. The picture on the right shows that those are the old Indian trails, and if you'll notice, a lot of the trails are the same highways that we have today. I-96 goes across the state, that was an Indian trail, 131 going up through the center of the state, and you can see how that all connected. It's kind of nice and kind of interesting. I recently learned, because of our historians, that 31 that goes from Muskegon up to Manistee was actually built by Native Americans. It was an Indian trail. But when the U.S. government needed a road built, or a highway built, they asked the Indians to build it because they knew the way and they knew the areas. So Native Americans actually built that road that I travel, because I work in Manistee and I work in Muskegon. So that's kind of cool. A lot of Native Americans worked on the bridge, the Mackinac Bridge. My dad was one of them, and my grandfather both worked on the Mackinac Bridge as iron workers. So my history runs deep here, and I really appreciate Michigan. I think that, yeah, we can look at that too. The slide on the left shows Native Americans in 1492. The top one, the black, shows that we were basically 100% Native Americans back in 1492. And as you progress through the years, you see less and less and less. In today's world, we represent, and it's not determined completely, but it's about 4 to 5% of the population. So we've been greatly reduced over the years through disease, through genocide. There's a number of reasons why. But at this point in time, we're at about 4 or 5% of the population. What else do we have going? There was a couple treaties that were of interest to the Indian tribes and to Michigan. The Treaty of 1836 and the Treaty of 1855, and I'm also proud to say that I had grandfathers on both treaties that were Ogema that signed the treaties of both of them. Of course, 1836 was the one that helped make Michigan a state. So, interesting background. On the picture on the right shows, and here's part of the problem with Native Americans. Because we're such a small minority, we're almost unrecognized in so many ways. So what you see is, I think this is one on the poverty level, household income. And what you see there are different numeric numbers of income households. What you don't see on there is Native American. And I don't like to go too much into politics, and I don't want to get off on any tangent, but the fact is so many times when you hear about minorities or people, they'll talk about the different ethnicities, but you won't hear Native American. And in all honesty, it is one of the most minoritized minorities, because at 4% within minorities, you have 4%, the other ones have 12%. So you're a minority within minorities. And then numerically, socially, all those different things. So I feel that we're kind of like not really recognized. So other than that, I think we're doing a lot of good things. Could you click to the next photo and see what we have? And again, I don't like to get political, but the picture on the left, the picture on the left, I think everybody raise your hand if you haven't seen that picture. Really? You haven't seen that one? Okay. Well, it's a recent picture, and I think it's like a micro picture of what's going on in society. This picture is a Native American with a drum that went up to this young man, and he's drumming in Washington, D.C. And they say a picture tells 1,000 words. And at first glance, it looks like this young man is maybe smirking at this older Native American who's beating the drum, and that the kid's in the background there. When I first saw it, that was kind of my first reaction. But as you understand the situation, it's totally different. And I don't like to discredit the media too much, but I think a lot of people jump to conclusions there. This young man is standing on a step. So when it looks like he's looking down and smirking, the actuality is he's probably shorter than the Native American with the drum. What looks like a smirk is he did not come up to the Native American. The Native American came up to him with the drum. And I think, I watched 14 minutes of this, by the way, that the young man was being as respectful as he could be. But we turned things around. And I think I heard that some words earlier, you know, and you have to be careful how things are perceived. And I think that's really where a lot of the social ills come from, is by prejudging. I think that was one of the words. And, you know, for one, I'm disappointed in the Native American in that situation, because I think it represents something that I don't represent. And in talking to him afterwards, I think there were some miscommunications that he was doing. So I'm disturbed and saddened by what happened there. There were actually 3 groups there that were all gathered, I think, at the Lincoln Memorial. And the kids were there because they were waiting for their bus. They had a right to protest what they were protesting, the Native Americans did, and I think it was Black Hebrews had the right to protest. But what was projected was so off. And I apologize to that young man and to the other students, because that's not how I think we should look. I think we need to do some more soul searching and not be rushed to judgment, and understand that everybody has a right to be who they want to be. In the other picture is Princess Caroline. And I could get choked up just thinking of her. Princess Caroline is the daughter of Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle was a very well and eloquent chief from the state of Washington. The city of Seattle was actually named after Chief Seattle. And this is his daughter, Princess Caroline. In her old age, she was discredited, and she lived very, very humbly in a shack right by the sea. And she lived off from selling clams that she dug out of the waters. And as you can see, even at that age, she was still out there digging clams. And the local children would throw rocks at her. Now that's a different situation. And when you think of an Indian chief that was so revered, and then in this one simple generation, his daughter is left to being very humble, and rocks thrown at her in the very city that was named after her family. And that's sad, but you see the 2 different situations, and I think that you really have to look, and you know, where, again, all I say, and I copied it from another Native American chief, is that we're all of the same height. And that's meaning that we're all equal, you know, and that's their way of saying it. So we get through that. What else do we have going on here? Talking about religion, there are several types of religion. As growing up, I went to just about every kind of church you could think of. With the Native Americans and the Italians, a lot of my family was Catholic. And then when I was raised by a Dutchman, we went to Dutch Reformed Church, and I went to Protestant churches. I studied Native American churches, so I have a wide variety in that too. And one thing that's in common is that we all believe in God. And whether we call him, Native Americans call him the Creator or Gitchimanitu. But that's the one similarity. Native Americans also think that there is no true beginning or no true end. And that's the common theme with just about every Native American religion, is that we believe that everything happens in Iran. So there's no true beginning, there's no true end, whether it be the earth, where's the beginning of the earth, where's the end of the earth? Life, where's the beginning of life, where's the end of life? And we believe that everything is circular in form and function, So, doing so, that's a relief to me, and I do believe that, and we watched the birds build their houses and their nests in the round, and everything flows, whether it's water on the earth, flows and goes back into a cycle. So we have the Medewan Society, we have what's called the Big Drum, we have the Native American Church, we have Shaky Tent. There's all kinds of different names for the Native American churches. So that's how we believe and what we believe in so many ways. We believe that all living things are created equal, that we all share the same breath, the same air, whether it be a plant, an animal, or a human being. We believe that all things are our brothers and sisters, whether, again, they're the plants, the animals, and people in general. So that's kind of it in a short form. Everything, I go back to Chief Seattle. I don't know if there's any other slides we want to go to. I can't remember. If you could flip through. The person on the right, that is Jane Johnson. She was a Native American from Michigan, and she became a well-known poet. If you can go on to the next slide, her name is Jane Johnson. If you look on the left, am I doing that right? Yes. the word below that is her Indian name. Does anybody want to hazard a guess to what that says? So it's pronounced Bamawamagishikwe, and that was her name. Now imagine being a young girl in second grade, and I know, Ron, for you and I, that's kind of hard to imagine, but being in second grade and you have to write that out, I can kind of see why she changed her name to Jane. Bamawamagishikwe, and that's only her first name. So you're writing out in the paper, I can imagine it took 3 to 4 pages. Anyway, but that name was given to her by her father. And what it means is the woman of the sound that the stars make running through the sky. And, you know, when you think how nice that is for a father to give his daughter a name like that, it's kind of amazing. Obviously, I think she would have been termed probably a very quiet person. And you look at the words in English and you think in Native American, how nice that is. So anyway, she never gave up her Indian name, but she did take the name of Jane Johnston, probably in order to sell more poetry and books. But so we have that. We also have, one last thing that I want to say about Native Americans is they had boarding schools. And the boarding schools were throughout the United States. My dad went to boarding school. He also was a World War II vet. And in boarding schools, they were trying to teach the Native Americans not to be so Native American. And they tried to teach them, and they did teach them in many cases, to speak English and not speak their native language. And so they took a lot of the culture away from the Native Americans at that fashion. The odd part is, in boarding school, and my dad was one of them, where they basically wanted him to unlearn his Native American language. When he got to World War II, and he joined with his cousin, you've heard of the Indian code talkers. The most famous of all are the Navajo code talkers. And in World War II, they were using their native language so that the enemy wouldn't know how to decipher it. And they couldn't because it was so unique. They also did that with the Ottawa. And my uncle, for sure, was a code talker, an Ottawa code talker. He joined the service with my father, and it's believed that my dad was also a Ottawa code talker because I think they talked between the two of them. But my dad didn't want to talk about World War II too much, but he did. But he never admitted that he was a code talker. He just said we were used. So anyway, what's ironic is that in these Indian schools where he went, they were trying to unlearn the language, but then he gets out of school, goes into the service, and they need them to use the very language they were trying to take away. And it's a very hard language, as you can see just by the one name, Bamawamagishikwe, that it's a very difficult language. I probably know about 25 words myself. And so we're trying to get our language back, we're trying to get our culture back, and I think we have an identity issue that we don't even know what we want to be sometimes. You know, I've been speaking to people for probably 30 years. And we always laugh, my wife and I laugh, because I was to speak at a group 30 years ago, and I walked in and I didn't know where I was going, and all of a sudden I see all these people and they have their cameras, and I said, can you tell me where the speaker is to go? And they said, oh yes, right in that room. They said, we have a real Native American that's going to be speaking to us. And they had the cameras up, and I said, I think that would be me. And they kind of looked me up and down, cameras went down, and it was just kind of funny because my wife saw it too. And so I'm not always the image, and Native Americans aren't always the image that you think they might be. This is the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird is representative of my clan. I'm Little Thunder, so the little Thunderbird here represents me. This was made by one of my tribal people. This was made by my father. And if you look at the beadwork, it's not really pretty. It's really rough, but it has so much meaning to me, and that's why I carry that. I'm from the Thunder clan, and so we take those things in and have to understand how we come back. Some of my tribal people would love to go back to the way it was. So if you go to a powwow, they want to show off their ethnicity and what they are and where they come from. And that's more exciting if you see somebody in full regalia, as we call it. But then the reality is, we as Native people and as Odawa people have changed over the years. We were known as traders in West Michigan, and we worked with the French, and we evolved. So in my opinion, I'm exactly where I should be and what I should be. And it sounds odd, but my family's lived here for centuries in West Michigan. The Italians came from New York and Chicago and met up in Muskegon, and they also came from the UP. So I've not gone anywhere. I'm right where I should be. And then when we talk about evolving, I think that we've incorporated a lot of things that Europeans have incorporated. And again, when we talk about traditional, you'll see little mirrors on their outfits, for example. Those are European. When you talk about horses, riding on horseback, the horses came from Europe. So what's the real thing? People have asked me to please wear my headdress. I have a headdress. It was my dad's. But we really didn't have headdresses as Ottawa people. You'll never find an Indian chief as Ottawa that actually had the headdress. That's more Southwest. My dad did it because he was trying to get his culture back. And I don't fault him for it, but that's a reality. So we have to refine ourselves and redefine ourselves as Native people. I'm just going to say a few words about, these are the words of Chief Seattle, who I mentioned earlier. And what he says is, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. He said, take only the memories and leave only footprints. He said, the earth is our mother, the earth does not belong to man, man belongs to the earth. We did not weave the web of life, we are merely a strand in it. This we know. All things share the same breath, the beast, the tree, the man, the air shares its spirits with all that life supports. This we know. Day and night cannot dwell together. There is no death, there's only a changing of worlds. This we know. I have to get out my goggles for this one. The perfumed flowers are our sister. The deer, the horse, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crest, the juices in the meadows, the body heat of the pony, and the man. They all belong to the same family. The shining waters that move in the streams and the rivers is not just water, it's the blood of our ancestors. If we sell you this land, you must remember that it is sacred. You must teach your children that it is sacred. Each ghostly reflection in the clear water of the lakes tells of events and memories in the life of my people. The water's murmur is the voice of my father's father. And what is there to life if man cannot hear the lonely cry of the whippoorwill or the arguments of the frogs around the pond at night? I am a red man, I do not understand. The Indians prefer the soft sound of the wind darting over the face of a pond, the smell of the wind itself, cleansed by a midday rain, scented with pinyon pine. And that kind of says the thought of Native Americans. I don't know how much you wanted me to go into, and I'm going to kind of cut it short here because I have a tendency to run on. I could probably talk for several hours, but I hope that gives you some idea into the heart and into the religion of Native Americans. And again, it's like any other religion or any other group. You know, you have several types of Catholicism, and you have, you know, the different churches, and it's no different for Native Americans. So I don't pretend to speak for all Native Americans. are all people. I know what I believe, and I know, what I've been raised to think. We talk about spirits, and sometimes people would laugh because we talk about animal spirits and the spirits. I believe in spirits. I believe in, and it's now no different if you talk about the Holy Ghost or the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's no different. And I know, and this is kind of hard to believe sometimes, but I look to the Creator for almost every decision that I make. I look out for my people, I look out for my tribe, I look out for my community, and for the world. So any decision I make, I've asked the Creator. We have a special connection in so many ways, and there are things that happen, and Indians believe, and not all Indians have this, not all people have that, and I don't believe only Native Americans have it, but there are visions. There are visions that are given to us, again, by the Creator. I think I've been fortunate enough to have at least 2 visions in my life, and I've talked to elders that have never had one. And the one vision I had was back in about 1970-something, 1980-something, and the Creator came and He said, I was in a frustrated position. I was asking questions that I had no idea what the answer was. And I basically cried out, oh God, what the hell is going on? And the Creator laid me back and said to me, your Father who art in heaven. And I'm going, I don't know what that means. And He said, the Son will lead His people. I don't know what that means. And He said, you're a child of the universe. I don't get that. And then He said, nothing. He did this. I'm going, I don't know what all that is. I don't know what it is. And a vision is different than a dream because you're fully conscious and you're fully awake. So I'm thinking, I don't understand. But then throughout my life, these things came to be, to me. And said, and the eagles will follow me, I believe, as silly as it sounds, and because we are a thunder clan. But anyway, I took it. As I became Ogema and chief of my tribe, and I had no aspirations to be a chief, trust me, I was in construction all my life. And when I became the chief, I was up at a resort, and I went outside and it was raining, thundering. And I went out there, and it sounded like a stadium full of thunder and lightning. And I stood out there, and I soaked myself, and people probably thought I was nuts. And then it came back to me, the Son shall lead His people. Was that a premonition? I don't know. But I know that there's just a lot of things that happen that create my faith. And that's really what, in my opinion, religion boils down to. You don't have to know what the answer is. You don't even have to understand the question fully. You have to trust in your Lord, or trust in your Creator, or trust in your Gichimanatu, and let them lead the way. And so with that, I mean, that's my religion. And I just, as I get older, we all have so much in common. We love our families. We honor our elders. We respect and try and hopefully raise our children. Those are all the same thing. We believe in a life after death, absolutely. And so there's really little change, And we talk about the Native Americans always say, oh, we loved our grandparents. And then the Italians go, oh, no, papa. We love our nonna and our papa. And then the Dutch, they all say the same thing. But I guess you didn't want to do this about nonna and papa or whatever you call them, grandma and grandpa. So in my journeys over the earth, by all the years, I realized you come all the way back around that circle and find out, you know what? We're almost all the same. We look a little different. We're different ages. But you go through the cycle all the same. And it's the same ending for everybody. And, you just realize there's very little difference in all of us. So with that, I'm going to stop. I did give a book. I'm going to donate a book. This is a book of Our Journey. It's of the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians. I'd like to donate a copy to the church And then I have a second copy that I am going to give away. Earlier I drew a number, that's easy for me to say. I drew a number to give away one book, and that number is, you'll look on your
Bulletin.
paper that you got.
The bulletin?
I lost the paper.
The front cover of the bulletin.
Front cover of the bulletin. And if your number is 42, you just got yourself a book. Oh, right there. There you go. So thanks again. I hope I wasn't too long. I hope I gave you a little bit of information on Native Americans and religion. And I wish you well. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you coming.